Is this a case of question asked, question answered on the issue of collusion? Is this over?
Well, not over until we see the transparency. I mean, the important question has been answered, right? The Russia thing was not a hoax. We were right that there was a massive Russian effort to elect him and to defeat Hillary Clinton. It's also important that we established that no Americans were part of that effort. That, believe it or not, that should be good news whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
President Trump now taking a victory lap, claiming complete vindication on the issue of his campaign's ties to Russia.
He's making it based on a pretty bold claim in that 4-page letter we got from Attorney General Barr that there was no coordination, there was no collusion. The language was pretty clear. There was nothing between this campaign and Russia. So on that basis, should he be breathing a sigh of relief?
I don't know that I read the letter from the Attorney General that way. I read him as saying the special counsel didn't find that the evidence established that there was any conspiracy between an American and the Russians. What other evidence there is, what evidence there might be that falls short of that standard, I have no idea.
Established is the word that you're honing in on there?
Correct.
Then there is the issue of obstruction of justice.
Mr. Mueller decides not to make a judgment on that particular issue. Does that alone surprise you?
It does. The purpose of a special counsel is to make sure that the politicals, in this case the Attorney General, doesn't make the ultimate call on whether the subject of the investigation, the President of the United States, should be held criminally liable for activities that were under investigation. And so the idea that a special counsel wouldn't reach the question and hand it to the political leadership doesn't make sense. I'm not prejudging it, I'm just saying it doesn't make sense on its face.
Then there was your firing. A few days after that, I sit down with President Trump.
In fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
What did you think when you heard that?
I thought that's potentially obstruction of justice, and I hope somebody is going to look at that. Again, the president appears to be saying, I don't know what's in his head, which is why I can't reach the conclusion. What he appears to be saying is, I got rid of this guy to shut down an investigation that threatened me.
Democrats are pushing for the release of the full report and exploring legal options for subpoenaing Robert Mueller if it's not made public.
You want this whole thing out?
Oh, it has to. Because the bedrock of the Department of Justice, which Bill Barr loves and Bob Mueller loves and I love, is that people have faith and confidence that it's not part of a political tribe. And the only way to establish that and to protect that bedrock of their confidence is to show them your work.
The president says this should never, ever again happen to an American president. What do you think about that?
Yeah, close your eyes. Again, change the names. Let me make one up for you. The Iranians, this is totally made up, the Iranians interfere in the election to help elect Barack Obama because they think they'll get a better nuclear deal from him. And during that election, an Obama aide meets with the Iranians and talks about the dirt they have that will help Obama get elected. And the FBI finds out about that. We should not investigate that? And then President Obama's national security advisor lies to the FBI about his contacts with the Iranians. And then the president, Obama, asked me to drop an investigation of that and then fires me and says, I was thinking of the Iranian thing. Who on earth doesn't think the FBI should investigate that? So the hypocrisy is revealed just by changing the names.
Has the damage to the reputation of the justice system, FBI in particular, been worth it?
I don't know, because I don't think we've seen in the history of our country a president try to burn down an institution of justice because he saw it as a threat. But in the long run, the institutions will be fine because the American people know them and also know this president, know what he's like. And so it's a harder question, but I'd say on balance, yes. Because I think the people of the United States are going to see what I know about the FBI.